Just after midnight, an emergency summons echoed through Windsor's private corridors. No press, no courtiers, only blood. Behind sealed oak doors, King Charles made a decision that would split the monarchy and the nation down the middle. What happened in that room has never been officially acknowledged, until now. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. It began with a whisper barely noticeable to those on the outside, but inside the palace, it was a thunderclap. A coded call from the king's private secretary activated a royal protocol not used since the passing of Queen Elizabeth. Key members of the royal family were discreetly summoned, no aides, no security escorts, no questions. Within 30 minutes, the corridors leading to the royal council chamber had been cleared. Lights dimmed, guards tightened, and a thick silence settled over Windsor like a prelude to storm. This wasn't just another briefing. It was something far more ominous. Camilla was nowhere to be seen, neither was Prince Harry, Meghan, nor Andrew. Those omissions alone sent chills down the spines of those aware of the protocols. The Queen Consort, who usually shadowed Charles during significant decisions, had reportedly been told to remain in her private quarters. Meanwhile, Anne and William arrived separately, each carrying sealed folders documents only a select few had clearance to even glance at. The tension between them was described as unspoken but unmistakable. This wasn't a meeting of unity, this was a tribunal. Royal guards, often a ceremonial presence, were seen doubling patrols around the perimeter of the chamber. Radios crackled with encrypted frequencies, and access to the corridor was denied even to senior palace officials. It was said that Anne gave a curt nod to the guard captain, before entering a signal she hadn't used since the tense days following Queen Elizabeth's death. Inside the chamber, voices were low, but one phrase reportedly rang through like a hammer striking steel. Charles, calm yet cold, is said to have leaned forward and uttered the words, "It's time we protect the crown from within." That sentence changed everything. It confirmed what some feared and others prayed wasn't true. This wasn't about ceremony, tradition, or even diplomacy. This was a purge, the type of decision that echoed through generations. And as the discussion intensified, secrets began surfacing, alliances became visible, and lines were drawn so sharply, not even blood could cross them. Charles wasn't just acting as king. In that moment, he was acting as the final arbiter of loyalty, legacy, and lineage. Every breath taken in that chamber came with consequence. Outside, the walls kept their silence, but inside, the monarchy was about to be rewritten word by word, name by name. And as the hour grew later, so did the realization that not everyone who entered the room would leave untouched. But the names left out of the meeting spoke louder than the ones invited in, and soon the reason why would rock the entire royal foundation. The silence outside the chamber wasn't just procedural, it was deliberate. As King Charles held court inside, 3 key royals found themselves locked out, their titles on the line, their futures already in motion, and their phones curiously suddenly disabled. Who were they? And why were they cut off at the most pivotal moment in royal history? Some absences can be explained, others speak volumes. And when Prince Harry, Meghan Markle, and Prince Andrew were all excluded from the emergency summit, alarm bells rang behind palace walls and far beyond. This wasn't mere oversight, it was a statement, a deliberate act of exclusion designed to sever ties before the ink had even touched the page. According to palace insiders, desperate attempts were made by at least one of the 3 to contact a senior aide just moments after news of the meeting reached them. The messages, unanswered. Phones, dead. Networks that usually pulsed with whispered updates and discreet alliances suddenly fell silent. Something or someone had cut the cord. Behind the scenes, royal tech teams were quietly instructed days earlier to perform a communication lockdown. Under the guise of security testing, access to internal systems was rerouted. Certain numbers linked specifically to Montecito and Royal Lodge were flagged and redirected to non-responsive servers. The operation was surgical, it was clean, and it was clearly premeditated. Meghan, once so adept at tapping her London sources, found every call bounced, every message left unread. Andrew, isolated even within his own residence, reportedly made direct contact with Camilla only to be told she had no knowledge of the meeting. A lie, some say, a shield, say others. But it wasn't just the trio of exiles feeling the tremor. Lady Louise, whose role in the family had always been understated, was seen departing Sandringham a full day earlier than expected. Witnesses say she looked shaken, pale, and quiet, nothing like her usual calm. Those close to her suggest she had received early whispers of what was to come, and that her father, Prince Edward, warned her to remain silent. The winds were shifting, and those with the most to lose were left out in the cold. Zara Tyndall, fiercely loyal to Anne but ever wary of royal politics, reportedly broke into tears after a hushed call with her mother. Sick to her stomach was the phrase used by a staffer. Her name wasn't in the crosshairs, but she knew others whose names heir, and she knew what it meant when a royal meeting is held without the entire house present. It meant decisions had already been made. Through all of this, one figure remained notably mute: Queen Camilla. The woman once seen as Charles's fiercest confidant kept her distance in the hours leading up to the event. No public schedule, no private reassurance to Meghan or Andrew, no message to Harry, who had once claimed to fear her influence more than anyone else's. Her stone-cold silence, her refusal to intervene or even acknowledge the gathering, said more than words ever could. She knew she was complicit, or perhaps she had already lost control of the board, but the truth wouldn't stay locked out for long, because inside that room, a royal reckoning was being scripted in ink. What started as a quiet probe into royal expenditures exploded into a full-blown audit of trust, loyalty, and betrayal. A confidential dossier was unsealed in front of the king containing 3 names circled in red: allegations, insubordination, and damning security reports. The titles were no longer safe. The first signs of something bigger brewing came not from Charles, but from Anne and William. Months before the now infamous midnight meeting, they had quietly authorized a string of internal reviews under the guise of routine financial maintenance. But what these investigations uncovered would shake the monarchy's core. Red flags appeared across multiple accounts, tied to charitable foundations, linked directly to Harry and Meghan. Fund flows that didn't match records, expenditures that lacked receipts, names of third-party vendors with no known background. At first, it was dismissed as clerical error. But when Anne personally requested a full forensic sweep, the truth became undeniable. This wasn't incompetence. It was something darker. At the same time, Prince Andrew's behaviour had once again ignited concern. Despite stepping back from public duties, he remained stubbornly involved in ceremonial events, even reaching out to former aides to explore options for returning to the public stage. He ignored multiple warnings from the palace, each signed by Charles himself. What the king had once tolerated as the silent burden of family had become a threat to the entire institution. Anne, always the realist, labelled it clearly: he's not stepping back, he's circling. But the moment the tide truly turned came with the discovery of a quiet exchange buried deep in royal surveillance archives. 2 unidentified royals were caught in hushed conversation near the Queen's former private chapel. The topic: a shadow campaign to reinstate a new order, one without the constraints of traditional hierarchy, one where influence could be brokered without title. The footage was brief but damning, and its inclusion in the dossier would later be described by an aide as the match that lit the room. And then came the letters, private correspondence, not between enemies but blood relatives debating alliances, questioning the king's fitness, and even hinting at a post-Charles contingency. These were not rumours. These were pages printed, signed and marked in ink. Delivered to Charles days before the meeting, they confirmed the king's deepest fears. He wasn't losing control, he had already lost it. The dossier placed before him was no longer about money, it was about power. And the 3 names marked for removal weren't chosen at random. They had written their own fate in whispers, in transactions, and in rebellion. As Charles read through the file for the final time, a single question escaped his lips, low, deliberate, and heavy with consequence. Are we absolutely certain this won't break us? William didn't flinch. Anne didn't speak. Their silence was the answer. Because sometimes, to preserve a legacy, something has to be shattered. But Charles didn't just make the decision, he made a statement. and that statement would shatter royal precedent. No announcement, no ceremony, just ink, paper, and irreversible change. King Charles, with trembling hands but unwavering eyes, signed 3 title revocations, each with a seal of finality. The crown had spoken, and the blowback would be seismic. There was no turning back. After hours of tense deliberation, after dossier pages stained with betrayal were laid bare, the decision was made not in public spectacle, but behind the tightest curtain of royal secrecy. 3 scrolls, prepared with surgical precision, awaited the monarch's hand. The first bore the name that had once shaken the foundations of the monarchy: Prince Harry, once beloved, once the pride of Diana's legacy, now formally stripped of the title Duke of Sussex. Not suspended, not deferred, stripped, permanently. The ink barely had time to dry before the second scroll followed. Meghan Markle's formal styling as Princess of the United Kingdom was rescinded. Along with it, her remaining patronage rights vanished into history, her royal portfolio sealed and returned to the vaults from which it came. No speech, no statement, just silence. Then came the final stroke of the pen, one that had loomed for years but was always avoided out of familial hesitation. Prince Andrew's remaining honours, military, ceremonial, hereditary, were wiped clean. The last strands tying him to official royal standing were severed. Not one voice in that room objected. Not even Charles, who had once clung to hope that his brother might fade quietly into the background. Hope had expired. The legacy was more important than the lineage. And yet, not everyone remained quiet. Queen Camilla, whose eyes betrayed disbelief more than defiance, was said to have made a quiet but firm protest, questioning whether such a move would fracture an already fragile institution. But Anne, resolute and unshaken, dismissed it with a single glance. "We are not here to protect comfort, we're here to protect the crown," she reportedly said. The matter was closed. The unity of the decision became clear when William, without hesitation, placed his signature beneath his father's. The vote was unanimous. The die had been cast. Almost immediately, the palace corridors buzzed with whispers of what would come next. If 3 titles were gone, who would rise in their place? Speculation ignited like wildfire. Lady Louise's name surfaced first quietly, respectfully, but persistently. Her loyalty, her discretion, her refusal to step into the spotlight for personal gain had not gone unnoticed. Then came Princess Charlotte, already a symbol of continuity for a modern monarchy. Discussions swirled over whether a symbolic reassignment of titles might signal a new direction, one of honour earned, not inherited. But the decisions made that night were not just about names or titles. They were about setting the monarchy's moral compass. For the first time in recent memory, consequence had arrived. Not as scandal, but as structure. Not as gossip, but as governance. The crown had chosen to speak with action instead of apology, and the reverberations would not stop within the walls of Windsor. But the ink had barely dried when the storm broke loose and the crown faced internal rebellion. As Camilla stormed out of the West Wing, her fury echoed through the walls, but Catherine said nothing. Behind her stillness lay power, planning, and the quiet precision of someone who had waited and won. This wasn't just a family meeting, it was a power shift. Camilla had walked into Windsor that evening certain she would sway the room. For years her influence over Charles had gone unchecked. She believed that soft persuasion, well-placed counsel, and private appeals could bend the monarch's will like they had so many times before. But this time, the wind did not shift in her favour. When the final decisions were announced, 3 names stripped of titles, 3 pillars of royal defiance, finally brought down, Camilla's face turned stone. She hadn't just been excluded from the process. She had been overruled, and the realization shattered her illusion of control. It wasn't long before tensions erupted. A private confrontation reportedly unfolded between Camilla and Princess Anne behind closed doors. Witnesses overheard only fragments, but the tone was unmistakable, sharp, icy, unforgiving. Anne's words, though never publicly confirmed, were said to cut deep. "This isn't your kingdom to command." The message was clear. The old guard wasn't just reclaiming order, it was locking the doors behind them. And standing beside that wave of change was someone Camilla never imagined would wield such silent force: Catherine. Throughout the evening, Catherine remained composed, eerily so. While emotions ran high and voices cracked under pressure, she held her ground without a single visible reaction. No smirk, no sigh, no shift in posture. It wasn't indifference, it was control. The kind of control that doesn't need to announce itself, because its impact speaks through outcomes. Behind that calm was knowledge. A leaked exchange days later revealed that Charles had confided in her weeks prior. She hadn't just known, she had prepared. Back in Montecito, Meghan Markle reportedly received the news as it unfolded online. Sources say she broke down, stunned not just by the titles being stripped, but by the ruthless precision of how it was executed. There was no room for negotiation, no offer for explanation. The message had been broadcast without a word spoken. Their chapter in the Crown was over, and no media empire, no memoir, no docuseries could rewrite that moment. But while the headlines focused on the fallout, few noticed the silent war that had reached its boiling point, the unspoken battle between Camilla and Catherine. A conflict that never played out in public arguments or press briefings, but in gestures, silences, and calculated steps. One had clung to influence through proximity, the other had earned it through patience. In that room, the contrast was impossible to ignore. Camilla left in fury, Catherine stayed in silence. One had been outmaneuvered, the other had ascended. But while the royals reeled, the public still had no idea, and the palace was preparing the ultima. To smokescreen. No official statement, no press briefing, just a carefully orchestrated set of unrelated headlines designed to distract. But the silence only deepened the suspicion, and now royal insiders are coming forward. The moment the ink dried, the palace didn't rush to the podium, it vanished behind closed doors. The royal communications team, long known for their calculated elegance, found itself flooded with contradicting directives. One source claimed they were told to hold all external releases. Another was handed a drafted unity statement, only to watch it be scrapped minutes before distribution. At the heart of the chaos was one objective: misdirection. If the public couldn't be told the truth, they would be fed just enough noise to bury it. Within 48 hours, a flurry of sugar-coated features blanketed national media. Royal outings, smiling portraits, articles on unity, charity, tradition, every shade of normalcy manufactured to overshadow the storm brewing beneath. But cracks began forming fast. The internet was not Windsor, it didn't obey royal silence. Within hours, screenshots started leaking, title removals from official pages, patronage lists that no longer featured Meghan, a military site quietly updating Prince Andrew's name to former honorary status. It wasn't an announcement, it was erasure in real time. Then came the digital rebellion. Anonymous insider accounts on X, formerly Twitter, began dropping breadcrumbs, threads detailing what they claimed were internal memos, whispers of the midnight meeting, mentions of Camilla's walkout, Catherine's silence, Anne's command. Some dismissed it as speculation, others saw it for what it was: control. D-leaks meant to say what the palace wouldn't dare publish. Suddenly, royal purge and hashtag the three strip trended side by side. Screenshots were shared faster than they could be denied, and Buckingham Palace's refusal to comment only poured gasoline on the fire. As questions piled up, one detail pushed public suspicion into overdrive. The official royal website, long curated and closely monitored, had altered its listings. Subtle, but unmistakable. Titles were missing. Patronage pages had gone blank. A royal family chart that once carried 10 active working members now displayed 7. No reason given, no correction offered. Just silence, an eerie, deliberate silence that confirmed more than it concealed. It was a masterclass in damage control through distraction. But even the most well-crafted smokescreens can't cover everything. Because when the people began to notice, they didn't just ask questions, they demanded answers. And with the palace maintaining its wall of silence, the ones cast out, those stripped and cut off, saw their moment to speak. But when the people began to question, the exiled royals had no choice but to answer on their own terms. Within 72 hours, Montecito lit up. A camera crew, a coded Instagram post, and a lawyer's warning shot. Stripped of titles but not ambition, Harry and Meghan launched their most public counterattack, yet one aimed directly at the institution that rejected them. They didn't need a press conference. Not this time. Meghan's message came through a single image posted to her personal channel, an open book resting beside a flickering candle, with the caption, "Truth always rises." It wasn't dramatic in volume. It was deliberate in tone, and it sent the message that the battle had only just begun. Within hours, speculation exploded. What truth? When would it rise? And who exactly was being targeted? What followed answered every question and raised even more. Leaked footage of Harry, filmed weeks earlier in a controlled interview setting, surfaced across multiple media platforms. Though brief, the clips were devastating. He didn't just criticize the institution, he questioned its moral foundation. In one excerpt, he looked directly into the lens and said, "You can strip a title, but you can't erase history, and you'll never silence truth." He didn't name names. He didn't have to. The world knew exactly who he meant, and the monarchy knew the fire was now public. Then came the legal response. Meghan's legal team, armed with constitutional consultants and high-profile attorneys, issued a bold public challenge questioning whether the monarchy had overstepped royal protocols and calling the decision arbitrary and legally unsound. They demanded full transparency on the process, access to the sealed dossiers, and a formal explanation for the unprecedented move. The palace declined to respond, but the silence only gave the allegations weight. This wasn't just a PR war anymore, it was turning into a constitutional chess match. But as the noise around Montecito grew louder, one absence became louder still: Prince Andrew. There were no statements, no photos, no leaks, just silence. And in that silence, a strange discomfort began to grow. Was he retreating out of guilt or waiting for his own moment to strike? Inside royal circles, his silence was being read as strategy. Outside, it was seen as cowardice. But either way, it added a darker undertone to an already volatile moment. Meanwhile, the public itself began to fracture. On one side, those who believed the monarchy had finally taken a stand for integrity. On the other, those who saw the move as vindictive, calculated, and steeped in old guard arrogance. Two hashtags, #NotMyKing and #ProtectTheCrown, fought for dominance across every platform. Opinion polls shifted by the hour. The battle for the monarchy's future was no longer confined to palaces and parliaments. It had spilled into the streets, the screens, and the hearts of millions. And through it all, Catherine and William remained silent. Their refusal to speak, to gesture, even to appear, became its own kind of answer. Was it approval? Was it strategy? Or was it simply the calm before another storm? The world watched and waited. But behind palace walls, one royal was about to flip the script, and it wasn't who anyone expected. In a move no one predicted, Princess Anne stepped forward not to protest, but to finalize. As the monarchy's fiercest guardian, her name on the decree turned whispers into law. She didn't just support Charles, she reinforced him with iron, and sealed the fate of the three. The silence that followed the revocations was heavy, but not yet absolute. There remained one final safeguard, an obscure protocol buried deep within royal precedent, untouched since the days of Queen Victoria. It was Princess Anne who unearthed it, not out of sentiment, but necessity. This ancient clause, once used to prevent heirs from reversing pivotal decisions out of emotional bias, granted the power to legally fortify royal decrees if enacted by a senior royal holding no succession claim. Only one figure fit the role. Anne invoked it without hesitation. The ink from her pen didn't just support Charles, it locked the door behind his judgment. From that moment, the stripped titles became immovable. No future monarch could reinstate them without a majority vote from the Royal Council. The very mechanism to overturn the decision was now bound in iron law. There would be no takebacks, no royal pardons. Anne had drawn the line, and she dared anyone to cross it. But what few knew was that her move wasn't spontaneous. A leaked internal memo revealed she had been preparing for months. Quiet consultations with constitutional historians, private discussions with senior legal advisors. Her commitment had not been reactionary, it had been calculated. She had seen the fractures forming long before the public collapse. And while others placated, postponed, or panicked, Anne built her endgame in silence. As her presence grew louder within palace walls, so too did whispers about her growing closeness with Lady Louise. The once overlooked granddaughter of Queen Elizabeth was suddenly seen shadowing Anne in private meetings, reviewing documents and accompanying her to events that had previously been reserved for working royals. Insiders hinted at Anne's quiet mentorship, positioning Louise not merely as a symbol of continuity but of correction. The next generation would not inherit scandal. They would inherit strength. Behind closed doors, Charles raised a private toast to his sister. Those who heard it said it was short, reverent, and filled with the kind of respect only forged in fire. To Anne he said, "The true protector of the crown." Camilla was noticeably absent from the toast and even more noticeably from the meeting that followed. No seat, no update, no voice. Her exclusion was not accidental, it was structural. The reshaping of the monarchy's inner sanctum was nearly complete, and Anne was now its architect. With the signatures signed, the clauses invoked, and the resistance neutralized, the monarchy stood at the edge of a new chapter, one no longer dictated by compromise. Anne hadn't just defended the throne, she had redefined who held the keys to its future. But if Anne solidified the new royal order, one unexpected figure would ignite its future, and it came from the next generation. Amid the ashes of royal rebellion, a new figure quietly emerged. Lady Louise, long underestimated, long hidden, was suddenly being escorted to senior briefings, courted by strategists, and photographed beside Anne and Catherine. The monarchy may have lost 3 titles, but it gained a new legacy. In the void left by the stripped titles, attention shifted to someone the public hadn't fully noticed before, but the crown had. Lady Louise Windsor, the quiet daughter of Prince Edward and the late Queen's favourite grandchild, was no longer on the sidelines. Whispers first began when palace sources revealed she had been offered patronages once held by Meghan Markle, roles in education, arts, and youth empowerment. The very causes once championed with cameras were now being passed to someone who had never asked for a spotlight. And that silence, that humility, became her greatest strength. It wasn't just symbolic, it was strategic. Louise was seen being privately escorted through Windsor by both Princess Anne and King Charles. These weren't casual tours, they were introductions to legacy, duty, and expectation. She listened, she observed, and then she acted. Her first quiet appearance at a charitable event was met with admiration, not fanfare. There were no exclusive interviews, no rehearsed speeches, just presence, and that alone lit a fire within the royal base. She was quickly embraced online as the untainted royal, a young woman shaped by tradition, not tabloids. Support for her grew fast, and so did speculation. Rumours flooded media circles that she was being considered for a formal Duchess title, not simply as a gesture, but as recognition for stepping into a role she never demanded, but wholly embodied. Some claimed the Duchess of Edinburgh title, long held in waiting, might be reissued in her name. Others suggested a new title altogether, one forged to reflect the post-reform monarchy. Whichever came true, the signal would be the same, a rebirth, built not on scandal but on stability. Even Catherine was seen stepping into the role of advisor. Eyewitnesses from a recent engagement noted how the Princess of Wales gently guided Louise behind the scenes, briefing her on press interactions, reviewing speech drafts, and offering subtle, confident nods. It was mentorship without ego, guidance without condescension. And perhaps most telling of all, it was an endorsement not in words, but in trust. If Catherine, the future queen consort, was backing Louise, then the monarchy had already chosen its next symbol. The message became clear. This wasn't a story about what had been lost, it was about what was finally being revealed. Louise wasn't a backup plan. She was the quiet future no one expected, and now, no one could ignore. In a family overshadowed by division and scandal, her rise marked a shift. Old names had been erased, but in their place new ones were beginning to rise, quieter, stronger, more enduring. And so, as the crown closes one historic chapter, another begins with power, purity, and peril all in play. But in this new royal era, who will be next? Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.